Hi everyone. Hopefully this time the Instagram lets us go live. We just tried going live with Amanda Crook and it did not want to let us, so we're going to try this again. And Willow's making a bigger fuss than usual, mostly because I am moving around her head as I attempt to get things going. So we're going to see if this time things behave. Oh, good. View the request, view the request. Willow, your fucking head is so huge. And hopefully this time Instagram works for us. Maybe. Maybe. Oh my goodness. Your head is so big and it's in my way. Yay! Hi, Amanda.
Yay, we did it.
The interwebs. You can just watch. It's true. Willow could basically have her own show if we're being honest. Oh no, now we're buffering. Instagram, what is going on today?
I feel like it could be my internet. I don't know. It seems like it's C plus internet today
Oh, yes.
as
You're also
opposed to
very, I don't know if that's on my end or for everybody.
I'm very what?
You're very quiet. I literally also just like moved my table closer as though that was gonna make it.
Is that better? Is that any better?
You're still very quiet. Can other people hear us? We'll just see. The internet's being questioned. Hello, hello.
Hello? Am I back? Am I here?
You're here. You're just like a little quiet and also slightly blurry, but we'll just see what happens. This is also rural internet at its best, so
Yeah. I can project better. Is this better?
yeah, that's a little better.
Okay, I'll just project.
How are you, my dear?
I'm doing well. I'm enjoying the day. It's a little cloudy here. I was hoping it was going to rain, but we've been in a really dry spell for the past 2 weeks.
Oh, that's not my experience up here. We've been having basically all the rain from the last 3 years of drought is all coming this year. Uh,
Oh, wow.
it's been a time. Okay, it looks like folks are saying Patty's saying quiet could be internet. So Patty's our tech witch, so she's probably right. And then I've got somebody else saying yes, but I agree. Amanda sounds far away, so it's like you're. I don't know. I think
Uh,
if we keep projecting, we'll see what happens.
yeah, I'll keep on projecting because in this exact moment, I don't think I could find my headphones in less than 90 seconds. So
That is
um,
fair.
I'll just keep, I'll keep speaking loudly.
So how's it going, my darling? You can hear.
It's
Oh,
going really well. So today I finally, I would say, restarted a project that I've been talking about restarting for like 3 years now.
nice.
Yeah. Um, So it's a choose your own adventure story that will be delivered over email.
Ooh, yes. I remember you telling us this story. Oh, Patty, sorry. Patty's saying, do you have Bluetooth headphones turned on somewhere else?
We don't own Bluetooth headphones in this house. We're not we're not really there as people. Um,
I love this choose your own adventure thing though. This sounds very fun and very exciting. And by email is also fun because I feel like I was expecting it to come literally by letter form.
no, that would be very expensive. Um,
This,
yeah, so the first step, so I had started writing the story and then stopped when I realized that it was going to be because it's interactive, right? So it's branching because
yes,
people get to make decisions. And so when I realized the volume of writing that it really would be, um, and how much more planning I needed to do, I got a bit intimidated, and then it became the thing that was on the side burner.
hmm
Um, so I stopped, and then finally, it is the only thing on my business plate aside from the classes that I'm currently teaching.
yeah,
Um, it's the only thing I'm doing until I'm done with it. So
that,
today I realized the first step is to do some maps of the branching.
yeah.
So today I did like first draft of one of the maps, and I feel pretty good about it.
That's so cool. But yeah, I like didn't even think of just I mean, you're essentially taking one task and making it like 4 or 5 times as big depending on how many story options there are.
Yeah. And I think I found a way to make it, it's not exponentially branching. So, like, there's, say, like, four main, four primary, like, chapters, if you will. And then within the chapters, there's two areas where it will branch.
Okay.
So it's not uh, infinitely branching.
Okay. Are they
So I
gonna
think,
branch potentially like into one another rather than like each branch having its own like tree growing?
no, they branch. It's like you branch in that chapter until you learn what you need to learn in that chapter.
Yeah.
And then the next chapter, everyone starts at the same spot again, if that makes
Uh,
sense.
that's cool.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I decided that um, that there's like some things you need to learn on the journey. So you
Yeah.
have to go through certain things to make sure you learn each
Uh,
lesson.
this is very cool. I'm very excited for when it's ready so that I can read it and choose my own adventure. Um, so I realized that we just kind of like hopped into talking as though everybody here like knows who we are and what we're doing. Welcome everybody. I assume actually if you're watching this, you probably know one or the other of us, or both of us. But for those of you who don't, welcome. I'm Ash. I am a fiber witch and hedge witch. And we are here talking to some of my favorite humans about the Sanctuary Hub and asking them about what their definitions of sanctuary are. And the Hub is basically behind the scenes, extra access as I'm writing my latest book. Um, and Amanda is one of my favorite humans and is an incredible plant witch who also has a delightfully uh, Nomi brain. For some reason, that's like the word that comes to mind for it. Very, very magical human. So you're writing this choose your own adventure story. What is it that you are normally doing in your business? Like for me, I'm like, oh, of course this makes sense for Amanda. But how, if somebody was like, who the hell is this person? How,
So usually I'm teaching herbalism classes
Mhm,
and plant magic classes. That's actually all that I do otherwise.
mhm,
So I for the past 5 years have been teaching classes in person in my garden and then also online. And
mhm.
so this year I'm just teaching classes online and then in person in my teaching space, which is where I am right now.
Cool.
Not in the garden, just because I'm in a garden transition year.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I teach. So I teach people how to work with plants to make medicine and magic.
Love it. What is your favorite plant right now?
Well, okay, that's the best way to ask that question. Right now, it is 1,000% clary sage. Actually, I can go get some if y'all want to come on an adventure with me because the clary sage is blooming right now.
Mm.
And it is so delicious and so fragrant. So I just harvested some blossoms. So they don't look as pretty because I harvested them yesterday morning. So they're definitely getting wilty. Um,
Oh,
but
but they're
they're these,
so pretty.
they're so pretty and like so they're sticky with nectar. They produce so much nectar,
Hmm.
and they they're like a sweet and spicy fragrance and flavor. And the flowers taste totally different from the leaves. So clary sage is a biennial.
Hmm.
Excuse me. So in the first year, you can harvest the leaves, and the leaves are really fragrant and they're really nice. Um, they're really yummy, you know. So I use them to make like yumminess potions. Like I don't straight up usually tincture them. I'll usually make like a white wine vinegar oxymel or something like that,
Mm.
or like just infuse them into white wine, that kind of thing, or just tea, like iced tea, or usually iced tea in the summer. And the leaves are nice for burning, but then the flowers have this like totally distinct fragrance. It's just like Oh my God, it's so yummy. And they're so pretty. And they're pretty when they bloom.
So would the flowers be like if you were going to be making a hydrosol and or essential oil, is it the flowers that you'd harvest for that and then the leaves for, I guess, like other uses like you were mentioning?
That's a good question. I don't actually know what part of the plant is typically used to make the essential oil. I think if you were someone who distilled your own hydrosols, you could do first year leaves or flowers separately, and they would just have very distinct fragrances. I think for me, so um, I guess when I think about the hydrosol, to me the hydrosol smells more like the leaves. So if I
Mm-hmm.
had to guess, I'd be guessing people were using leaves, but I'm not sure about that. And I don't, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I should look into that. I do like the hydrosol because so clary sage, um, you know, as its name might suggest, is connected to the eyes and like clearing the eyes and clearing the vision.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one of the best uses for clary sage is to help to open the second sight.
Ooh, yeah.
And traditionally, if you rinsed your eyes with clary sage in any way, like with a tea, or if you just put your face in the plant, um, that would that would make it so that the fairies cannot confuse you with a glamour.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I use clary sage. I mean, I'll use clary sage if I'm, journaling or doing something where I need to like access my own insight.
Mm-hmm.
But also, I'll spray clary sage hydrosol on my eyes if I'm going out botanizing.
Uh-huh. Oh, I'm seeing here Barefoot Botanicals has made hydrosol with flowering tops, including the leaves. Okay, so yeah,
Oh, okay.
which also like makes sense in terms of like whether you're trying to get essential oil or not, making hydrosols does require quite a lot of plant material, uh,
Yeah.
even if you're just doing like, a 2 liter still and not expecting to get any oils out of it. So yeah, I
And
guess
that's
that's
what I use. I use Barefoot Botanicals
ah
hydrosols. So
cool.
they're a local farm. They're a farm local to us
Oh,
in
nice.
Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So clary sage is really good. Like if you're out mushroom hunting or
Mm,
foraging or going into any situation where you don't want the fairies to manipulate you.
yes. Oh, this is so cool. See, this is why I love talking to you about plants because it's like here's the like practical herbalism part of it, and then also here's the like magical don't fuck with the fairies part of it. It's exactly what I need when it comes to my plant buddies. And apparently Willow agrees. All you can see is her face right now. So is there, I guess, let's get into your definition of sanctuary. And I'm really curious about this with you because we've also been spending, so for those of you who don't know how we're connected, we're in a lovely Bizwitch coven of a bunch of wonderful humans. And so we talk on a pretty regular basis, popping in and out. And so you're currently in transition as far as physical space for your farm, which has historically been like a really huge part of your business and also like for you and your partner is just like how you guys function. Um, and so I'm wondering about like how are you currently like finding sanctuary whilst being in the midst of transition? What is your like ideal version of sanctuary? All of those things. I'm just nosy.
That's a good question. So what Ash is referring to is the fact that I have had my garden at the same in the same spot for the past 6 years. Before that, it was at a different spot for 2 years. So I'm in the seventh year of my business. And so at the end of last year, my lease on the current property ended. And then my landlords are allowing me to keep the garden there for one more year,
Mhm.
not to have classes there, but just basically to harvest.
Mhm.
And so that if I were able to find a place to move to within a year, then I could move some plants with me.
Yeah.
And at the start of the year, there was a property that I was pretty confident that I would be moving to, and now I I'm less certain about that. So I've like put that on pause.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting this year because this year what I'm doing with the garden is I'm harvesting from it, like the clary sage I just showed you, and keeping things weeded enough to harvest from,
Mm-hmm.
not really planting new things. I planted some tulsi, and then transitioning it into a meadow.
Mm.
So I've sowed wildflower plants. Last fall, I planted a lot more monardas and just like other kind of meadow plants.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's not a lot of work to do in the garden. There's just like some judicious mowing and weed whacking and then harvesting mostly.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been interesting this year. So it's interesting, like, so this year I'm not really having to confront, I would say like the reality as much because like I still have a garden.
Yeah.
But next year when it's looking like I probably will not have a garden, that will be the first time in my adult life, like the first time since college, that I haven't had a space that I was tending and caring for.
Right.
Which is a thing that makes me very like emotional when I think about it because I'm like, like what the fuck am I gonna do?
Mm. I
But I
mean, you're
never
busy next year, just like separately, but yes.
sure. But like, it's just so different to like give your like I think the sensation of giving my labor to a space,
Mm.
like a piece of land, and like it's just such a big part of who I am. And I love the forest. Like there's a forest place really nearby that I feel like I'm like romantically in love with it. Like I love the space so much.
Mm.
Um, but the forest doesn't need you.
Right.
You
Yes.
know, the forest might enjoy your affection,
Yeah.
and your noticing and your presence, but like it doesn't. It's going to exist whether you show up or not. Like your presence. I don't want to say like the forest doesn't care about your presence, but like ultimately it doesn't really matter that much. Whereas like a garden is a co-creation with you and the space and the plants and the insects and all that. Or a farm, because before having this garden, I was a farmer.
Mm-hmm.
So that is going to be emotionally very hard. It's also it's even this year when I'm not working outside that much. So what I did because I'm not gardening my own garden, I took on like gardening clients. And then I'm just like I'll like spend days working on other people's farms because I just miss it. Which is maybe not that conducive to running a business in which I need to be generating income.
I mean, wait, are people paying you to come and do their gardening, or you're just like, please let me garden?
People are paying me to do their gardening, but it's even if I was doing it full time, it's not enough money to be,
Right.
and then like being on someone else's farm is like definitely not enough money to be like a real
Right.
contribution. Um, so so I was like earlier in the month or earlier in June very sad about this, and then I think the thing that helped me was that I had this memory. I was talking to a friend about this, and I had this memory of when I was 24. So I was a full-time veggie farmer at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I was a full-time veggie farmer, but I was studying herbs, and I guess was studying herbs, but I was studying herbalism, but I had never grown herbs.
Yeah.
And growing herbs is really different from growing vegetables.
Yes.
And so I had this idea to start like a kind of like a practice herb garden to maybe start my own herb farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was sitting down one night journaling, and I realized, but I also had a story I really wanted to write because I, was starting to do a lot of writing at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that I really would have to choose. Like I
Mm-hmm.
could not start. You only have so much free time, especially when you're farming. But anyone only has so much free time.
Yeah.
And so it must have been April or March even because I was deciding if I should like use my 2 days a week to like start a garden that year.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I would have to choose either start a garden or work on this writing project.
Yeah.
And that was a hard choice, but pretty quickly I was like, well, I'm 24. I'm not getting any younger. Like this is the time to start the farm.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And it was a hard decision, but I think it was the right decision.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly not a decision I regret. But having that memory come up made me realize like, oh, I decided to close this door for a while.
So maybe it can reopen.
Yeah, and so maybe this is just a time, like, I do believe in my heart that there is a piece of land that is waiting for me and that, wants me there.
Yeah.
And maybe this is just a moment, like, in between properties where I can use all the spaces in between and all my spare energy to work on writing projects um, because both of those things are things that take all your extra energy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I, I like, I love this a lot, because it also feels very much like, I mean, I've definitely been experiencing this year, this like sense of something's coming or something is shifting. And like you can feel that the shift is there, but just like trying to force it and trying to like get out of that like in between liminal, like crunchy space of waiting, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and just like recognizing when it's like, okay, me wanting this so much, or me like trying to make this happen in a very specific way, in the way that in my brain it should happen, is actually like energetically blocking it from happening the way that the universe wants it to happen. And so, and this is like across many facets of my life right now, but like every single time I have to remind myself, and the universe keeps on reminding me, like, okay, you've like learned to back the fuck off and just let us let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And now in this other area of your life, you also need to back the fuck off and let it happen. And it's, I mean, it's hard. And I blame the amount of fire in my chart that I'm just like very bad at being patient. Um, but it also, I think, is like when you're more of an action oriented person in life, it can be very hard to just like step back and trust, and just like believe that, okay, when it is supposed to happen it will appear, and then figuring out like a to do that, and then b, once you have agreed with the universe that yes, okay, I will back off, then all of that extra space opens up, and realizing, okay, this is a different kind of opportunity and how do I use that. And so this very much feels to me like you're doing that, and that you're like, without officially doing a road opening spell, you're kind of doing a road opening spell. and and yeah, I totally agree that like there is a piece of land that is waiting for you, and I suspect that it's going to appear as you are like culminating on this current project, and it's like had the time that it needs to do something. I am willing to put money down on the fact that that is when the land will appear and be like, okay, we're ready now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fucking hard in the meantime. Like, it's not
Yeah.
comfortable.
Yeah, and like I think finding I think I'll need to find a few other ways to get that energy out. Like, um,
Yes.
I was at a friend's farm recently, and her husband's a chef,
Mhm.
and they on the property where they live, they don't have space to garden, and she has a whole veggie farm, so that's not a problem.
Mhm.
But I was on her farm, and there was this one bed that held all these various plants in it, and this very like uh, cute, informal looking trellising for something. I was like, what is this? And she's like, oh, that's Ian's bed. Like, I gave him a bed to like plant things in. And I thought, oh, that's cute. Like, you gave your husband like a bed on your farm. And then I was like, oh, I should do that. Like, I should ask John for a bed, you know?
Yes.
Because like, there's a lot of things that John doesn't grow that I
Yeah.
wish he would. And the reasons he doesn't grow them are completely very valid. But like, he doesn't grow sugar snap peas. He doesn't grow leeks. He doesn't grow fava beans. He doesn't grow my favorite varieties of tomatoes.
Yeah.
Um, he stopped growing Brussels sprouts, you know. So, and like I understand the reason for all these things, but
You're like, I still want to eat these.
yeah, I still want sugar snap peas, and like Brussels sprouts are the most delicious things ever.
True.
Um, so I've been thinking about that, and I was like, maybe I could convince John to,
I
you
think
know,
that makes so much sense, because also, especially like if you're growing for personal use, then you don't actually need like a gigantic area for it. Sorry, my nose is like, you want to sneeze, and I don't. But um, the like I honestly, even just like looking at my very, very tiny little plot of urban land, it's like a postage stamp essentially. And my back garden beds that I built at the end of last year so that they were ready for this spring. Um, they're my dye garden beds because they're in the back lane, so it doesn't matter like whatever the fuck is happening car wise back there because I'm not consuming them. They're going out to textiles. Uh, but they're about maybe 2 feet deep and maybe well maybe like somewhere between 2 to 3 feet deep and then maybe I would say 8 feet total depth wise. And so it's literally just like a row each of each thing. And if I was planning on growing enough that I could use it for my business year round and that I was trying to be dyeing sweater lots out of it, then no, it's absolutely not enough space. That's where I need not just me growing a farm, but I need to employ a farmer to just do that shit for me because the amount that I would need is just like ridiculous amounts. But for like a sock yarn, there's absolutely enough that comes out of it. And so it's like, oh, okay, if I'm like reducing my expectations of how much I need, and I think especially for like, if unless you're doing hydrosols, for the most part, most herbal preparations don't require that much plant material. And so, like, even if you just have like a pot of calendula, if it's just making for you and John, that's enough in a year, probably producing wise, that you can like make what you need out of just that pot. And, but I can also see it being like a hard mental and emotional transition to move from like a very large area that you are tending to then like shrink it down.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing that I've really learned over the time I've had my business,
Mm-hmm.
so I had been a veggie farmer, and then I started my business for 2 years. I was running it as an herb farm,
Mm-hmm.
and then I transitioned to having a teaching garden. And there's a big difference between having a farm or a space that is for production
Right.
and a garden, which to me, a garden is a space where maybe you want to harvest from it, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also designed for people to be in.
Yes.
And that's like it's a very different mentality. It's just a different energy. It's a totally different situation.
Yes.
So yeah, so I think I could definitely have like a bed and grow, enough of some things to produce. But
Mm-hmm.
um, yeah, the garden situation will be on hold. But
Right. Yes.
that's okay. That's okay.
It also makes me think of the like when you were just talking about gardens, like it's I think like often, especially when we're in urban spaces, then the thought process is like, oh, if you're growing a garden, then it is for production. Like you're either growing food or you're growing like flowers that you want to be, cutting or whatever. And, but your definition of a garden being a space that is for people to be in, then my brain immediately went to, yes, of course, sanctuaries like gardens have consistently through history and across cultures been grown for people to have as places for sanctuary where like churches will like grow labyrinths of gardens for you to walk through in prayer and meditation and like that's it's not just churches. I'm thinking quite specifically of like being in the UK and going to like abbeys where they have them. But it also happens across other cultures. And there's like medicine wheel gardens and sensory gardens. And like when I think of the land that I eventually want to be tending, a big part of it is having like, yes, the production gardens for the various things that we need for the business and also for my family, but also to have sensory gardens where like, kids can be walking through and playing and learning boundaries with plants and being able to like touch something and have it be like really aromatic and like feeling what the different like softer things being closer and then also like recognizing like okay, here's the nettle patch and this is what we learned from nettles and having it be this like multi-sensory experience that you can be moving through, and it's not only for the purpose of consuming from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that I love about having had a teaching garden is a garden that exists not only, I mean, my one of my main missions is always to get people interacting with the plants as living beings.
Mhm.
Because often when people study herbalism, you're just like, you might be getting packages in the mail of dried herbs,
Right.
which is nice and it's great. We can do that. But I feel like, you're not really going to learn unless you can see the plants as living
Yes,
beings.
agreed. Absolutely agreed.
But beyond that, like interacting with them, because there are so many gardens where you can just look at plants. And I feel like for people, this might be a controversial opinion. I guess this is the way I feel. I'll say this. I'm not a very visual person. Like I have this theory that everyone's brain has a primary sense.
Hmm.
And while I realize that technically for humans, if you have sight, truly probably sight is our primary sense because it is the thing that helps us navigate. Like I get that,
Hmm.
but maybe beyond that kind of ranking, I think that everyone has like one or two senses that they actually get the most information from and that they actually prioritize. And if
Yes.
anyone's not sure what that sense is, like think about the thing that bothers you the most. And it's probably that sense. Like if you're someone, and I didn't really realize, I realized this like in past years being around, first of all, being around a lot of visual artists. I had not been around a lot of visual artists until becoming involved with plants. And now I realize there's a huge overlap there. And then being with John, who's like he's so exceedingly sensitive to loud or grating noises,
Yeah.
um, that I'm more aware of them. Like if I hear a noise like that now, I'm like that needs to stop. And I was never like that before, but it's because I'm aware like that he's sensitive.
Interesting.
Whereas for me, it's smell. It really is fragrance is like I think my most important sense, and then followed by flavor, and
Hmm.
then everything else I could give or take really. Like I mean, obviously I care about.
Obviously, we want to keep them, but also.
Yeah. Um, so like so that's my caveat is like I am not the most visual person.
Mhm.
I don't get as much visually. But I think that for people who are not already a little ways down the path in terms of plant ID and botany and knowing plants,
Mhm.
most people just have this like green blindness, it's called, where you just see plants and you see like wall of plant.
Yes.
And so I think unless you're someone who's really already engaged with plants, being in a space like a botanical garden, for instance, or even the forest, if you're able to look at plants but not use other senses to interact with them, I think that that's not as helpful as being in a place where you can interact with them with your other senses.
Yeah.
So, and like many gardens are not designed for people to just be harvesting from.
Yes.
You know, which again I understand. Like you don't want people traipsing through a botanical garden like picking things.
Mhm.
But that's I feel really strongly that like teaching gardens are important, or gardens where people can harvest from, because we need to be able to smell things and taste things and make potions, make medicines, make things that are delicious, hear the rustle of the leaves as you touch them, feel the texture of petals or leaves. Are they sticky? Are they resinous? Are they prickly? Are they soft? And I think that we're just such sensual creatures, and we live in a very sensual world, and um, engaging with plants only from this like idea of like, okay, what is the picture in the botanical drawing, and then what are like the information that you can list.
Yeah.
Uh, Again, like I'm grateful for that, but I think it just certainly it's not conducive to remembering shit about them.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's harder
Absolutely.
to it's harder to remember the facts if that's all you've got.
It's so true. And it's such an interesting thing. I mean, in the last few years, as I've actually gotten into gardening and like the plants that I am, Patty says, this is why Amanda is amazing. She makes everything sensually immersive. Exactly. Um, but yeah, like as I think of the different plants that I've been growing, a lot of my like I started doing making potions and making herbal products before I was growing as much as I am and before I felt as comfortable like working with plants and like seeing them through life cycles. And I still would not consider myself like particularly green thumbed. But I do find it so like my relationship with a plant and my value in terms of like my the like just the way that I look at them and is very different when I am helping them to grow from seed to, you know, mature harvesting and then seeing them through life cycles. And like now that I've had some of my garden beds for a couple of years and we've had extremely different weather in those years, just seeing like who thrives in what conditions, like my comfrey thrives no matter what. And it makes me just like so much more grateful for the comfrey root that I put into like one of my primary formulas. Um, but it also has me like you know, really valuing the very small harvests that I get from my small portion of land. And I kind of like reserve them and I source most of my other herbs from other spaces that are, you know, much larger farms, right? But like the things that I grow myself become more precious because, you know, I've like been involved and the magic that comes from them also feels more potent as a result too.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Um, I was thinking about my definition of sanctuary,
Mm-hmm.
and this is the, I guess, broad but like truest definition. I think to me, I think a sanctuary is a place where you feel completely safe being yourself.
Mm,
And I think that that has two components. The first one is like the safety,
yes.
which means actual safety.
Yeah.
Um, and then the feeling that you can like truly be who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that, you know, I was thinking of like, because I think what a kind of a first image that can come to mind if we think of sanctuary is like a beautiful garden alcove, maybe outside of a spiritual center, or like the large quiet space within a spiritual building, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I was thinking the reason why those places feel like a respite is because um, in the ideal of them, when you are in that kind of space, you are supposed to feel complete acceptance and complete divine love. And
I
I,
completely missed what you just said because a truck went by.
oh no, I said, I think that
Sorry.
the reason why those spaces can feel like a respite is because when they are at their ideal, they're
Yeah.
supposed to be places where you can feel complete acceptance and complete divine love.
Yes.
And obviously, it doesn't, that's not always how things play out
Yeah.
with organized spiritual practices. But when they're functioning at their best, that is their purpose.
Yeah.
And you know, I think spaces, either a space where you just feel so safe that you can fully relax,
Hmm.
and or a space when you feel that comfort of divine love,
Hmm.
that is what sanctuary is.
Yes. I love that a lot. It's also, it's so interesting. Like, this is the first conversation that I've been having about sanctuary where I'm thinking of, uh, I'm thinking of botanical gardens in like, in, religious spaces that I've traveled through over time. Like I'm not into organized religion at all, but I really love visiting temples and churches and religious buildings that are like old and full of whatever ghosts are there. And I find them really interesting. And they're not always comfortable spaces. Sometimes there's like some pretty significant disruption for the ghosts there. But I often find that the spaces that have botanical gardens that are maintained feel much calmer and more settled. And I suspect that the plant spirits have something to do with that, where it's like by maintaining these botanical spaces, then there is like a tending and a reverence and a calmness there that even if there's really fucked up stuff happening elsewhere, there's there's an intentional attempt to keep some peace in the space and for people to feel welcome in the space.
And also like a processing, because when plants are growing, that is the opposite of stagnation.
Yes. Yeah.
Because like they're going through their life cycles, maybe the place like, but probably there's like a death cycle, a rebirth cycle, and I do think plants retain memory and knowledge and things like that, of course, but there's still this like life cycling and composting that is happening, and regeneration. I think that when people are surrounded by plants, like you really do feel that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Um, is there like if you were to build or not build, but if you were to start and tend your like perfect sanctuary garden space, what plants would be in
Ooh. Well, I mean, all of them.
it?
I
You're like
think
every single plant in the world.
I guess when I think about my imagined future garden,
Mhm,
there, I would say, are 5 zones. So
mhm,
there's a central zone that is perhaps the garden,
mhm,
that has a wide diversity of plants for harvesting.
mhm,
And again, it's designed for people to be in. So there's probably a large central gathering space,
mhm,
and then pathways that flow, and then little nooks where people can sit. And that would
mhm,
have, the whole gamut of plants that can grow in this ecosystem, native, not native, but whatever can grow, um, medicinal plants to be harvested.
mhm,
Then there would be another zone that is a meadow, a managed meadow.
mhm.
And that would maybe have some pathways through it, but that would be there again for education about what a meadow is and pollinators and insect relationships, and for some harvesting. Um, so, it would be there for maybe humans to walk through, and observe. But I love meadows. And then there would be a medicinal orchard. I'd like to have a medicinal orchard.
Yes.
I'd like to have tended forest gardens, so spaces in the forest,
Mhm.
where herbs are being cultivated, where forest herbs are being cultivated. And then I have this other fantasy, which is to have private garden spaces that can be rented. So imagine
Ooh.
like, you know, a space that's not too big, not too small, like maybe 50 by 50 or 60 by 60 feet, that is enclosed with a very beautiful wall. And
Mhm.
they might have different themes. So maybe one of them is like a sensory garden, like we were talking about, where there's a lot of plants that you can walk barefoot on, fragrant
Mm.
plants, um, perhaps plants that are meant for napping on.
Mm.
And then there might be one that is more meant for drawing, or one that's more meant for meditating.
Yeah.
But the idea would be that they're private spaces because, in herbalism and plant magic and any kind of plant work, we're always talking about like being still with plants and listening, meditating with plants. But
Mhm.
I feel like you can't really do that if there's people around and you feel like
Uh,
you're being watched.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Or like, what if you just want to take a nap?
Yes, and you don't want people to be like wandering around. I think also where like honestly the number of like wild spaces that are like accessible enough for people to relatively easily get to and are also safe. So it's not like requiring you to like have bush skills and things like that. Like there's not as there's, I mean, certainly there's many of them around the world, but there's a lot of them that require you to have like pretty significant survival skills in your back pocket. And so like places that are relatively easily accessible and that people know about and that have that like very diverse range of multisensory plants are it's a small number and so people do flock to them and that's lovely, but yeah, it does then make it harder to have that like quiet intimacy where you're also not in the back of your mind thinking, oh, maybe I'm going to be interrupted, even if when you arrive it's quiet, that you're thinking, but probably somebody's going to come along. Like I just think of, you know, where the places are that I take Willow for hikes and it's like, yeah, these places are beautiful and they're, you know, quieter, and I know, you know, which days of the week I'm likely to be able to see less people, but chances are still pretty good that I'm going to see some people. And so there's like you're not kind of relaxing your guard in as much of a way as you could if you knew, okay, I have this space for a dedicated hour or 3 hours or 6 hours or however long, and so I can just let myself get into whatever flow I need and not think about anything else. Which I think is also maybe why like my dream situation is to like have land that is big enough to like do all of the things that I want to with other people, but then also have like a significant portion of it literally walled off with plants and fencing that doesn't allow people to be interrupting. Like there is that idea of like a personal sanctuary space. And like I'm not even gonna pretend that I like believe in like hi I'm Winifred. Like I'm not even gonna pretend that I believe heavily in common spaces for that like everything needs to be a common space. Like I'm very into having my own private space. And I think that a lot of things should be a lot more accessible and things don't need to be as privatized or as like, you know, owned by corporations or whatever the fuck. But I also am somebody who does not have any desire to like live in a co-op situation or live in a commune situation where everything is free range. Like if I were to ever live in a commune, I would be like, cool. And also this portion of the commune is mine and you don't come in unless I tell you to. Like, fuck off.
Well, and I think that John always says like that the definition of happiness is being able to be warm when you want to be warm and cold when you want to be cold.
Mm,
And
he's a
I
wise boy.
think what?
He's a wise boy.
And I think that's true for a lot of things. Like, right? Like I think that whether people feel like they're introvert or extrovert or whatever, ultimately, I think, we're social animals. And I think for humans, it's important to be with people when you want to be with people and be alone when you want to be alone. And those two things, usually one of them is harder to achieve, right? Depending on what your
Yeah.
living situation is. And so, yeah, I think that's why, like, in my ideal space, there's like the main garden is for gathering.
Yeah.
And then there's private spaces because most of the time I want to be with people. Sometimes I want to be alone,
Yeah.
you know?
I like this a lot. Um, I realize that we're coming up on time. So what are your current plans and I mean, you're writing this Choose Your Own Adventure series, which is very fun. Um, what, what's kind of like in your incubation area right now?
I think mostly this story, like I said, I've been thinking a lot about, I feel like everything is in this big transition right now. And I've been thinking a
Mhm.
lot about like what I want to offer people slash
Mhm.
what I actually want. And
Mm,
I've been thinking about how like the thing I want the most in life right now is like to read stories.
Mm.
That is what I do. I spend a lot of time doing it. I like it. And you know, and so I think like that's something that I want to give people right now. You know, like I'm not in a position where I can give people the sensation in my garden. Um,
Hmm.
and, you know, I'll find a way to do that again, but I just can't do it right now.
Hmm.
But the other thing that I want and can give people is stories. And so I think thinking about that also, like I've really seen myself as a teacher for the past few years, which is great. Like I love teaching. But also I realized like I love teaching the most in the garden and in person. And I can teach in person in this space. But I'm most energized by teaching in person. I think that that's also something people want a lot of right now.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think just like I'm trying to shift that mindset for myself of um, focusing on writing and then focusing on marketing a story, which is different from what I have been selling and marketing for the past years. Like, I guess 3 years. I guess I've been teaching online classes for 3 years now.
Hmm.
So, you know, that's very different. So I'm just working on shifting that mindset. And then I will like, well, then, you know, what should my website look like? What should, you know, um,
Yeah.
what are the other changes that will follow? But first I realized like, I've just got to get this thing written. And that means like changing, changing my working on a schedule that gets me writing more.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Which would be definitely different from farming schedules. Although I guess in theory it could be similar if you wanted to like maintain it, but I don't know if like I feel like writing brain and gardening body are like fairly different in terms of like when they're happiest.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today because like my brain takes a while to wake up,
Hmm.
and I really like leaving the house in the morning. And so in an idea, if in a world in which I'm a disciplined human,
Hmm.
I could go outside and garden for 2 hours, come back, shower, and then write.
Yeah.
Um, Really, what happens is because like, and I think I'm most creative in the afternoon, and most focused in the afternoon.
Hmm.
Uh, but then also when I put off something like writing this story, then I think I've probably got to do it first thing in the day,
Aha,
even if
yes.
that's not the best time, just to like honor that idea of like you've got to do the most important thing first. Like
Yeah.
you like if you know. So I'm trying to figure that out right now because and working outside for me like or even going for a walk outside like that is how I generate ideas. So those
Hmm.
two things aren't mutually exclusive. I guess like it's the there's still all the other little running of the business stuff and like prep for the classes that I'm teaching and teaching of the classes. So it's like if the only thing I was doing was like garden time or forest time or noon, but then realistically there's like all the other stuff. Uh, and that stuff really gets in the way because like it feels more productive, right? Because you check it off your list. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that right now. Like, should I try and make writing be the first thing I do, even if I feel like my mind isn't really woken up yet, just so that I do it?
Yeah.
So I'll keep you
It
updated.
is. I definitely recognize and sympathize and empathize with that struggle because yeah, especially like, when we run these micro businesses and nobody else is doing shit for us, or if we have somebody else doing something for us, it's like a really specific task that we've passed over. And it's like, great, so we've passed one thing over and there's still a million other things to do on the to-do list. Then those like creating that like space for the creative can be like ideally what you want and what would you want to be doing. And then also there's the email from the customer that you need to respond to, and there's the social media stuff that you need to like be planning out, and there's the newsletter that you need to pre-schedule, and there's the packaging supplies to reorder, and then there's like the whatever Instagram live to do and prepping for the class. And then you look at the time and you're like, fuck, it's been a full work day already.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't touch any of those things. And also somewhere in here, I'm supposed to be a human. Like, you, I, I, I don't think that there's like an ideal situation. I also have definitely found, and it doesn't actually make it easier. It actually makes it harder sometimes, I think. But I found seasons and weather makes such a huge impact too on like my ability to get work done. And so then you're trying to like work these larger projects around, oh, okay, in winter, I'm more like I'm slowed down. And so maybe there's not like the gardening that necessarily needs to be happening, but I'm also not going to wake as early because the sun takes so long to rise and I rise with the sun. And so in the summer, I'm awake at 6 a.m. And by 10 o'clock, I've gotten a shit ton of work done. And in winter, I'm waking by 9:30. And so it's taking me to mid afternoon to get the same amount of work done. And it's yeah, I don't know, it would be easy if there was like kind of a static thing, but I think one of the benefits and also one of the biggest like tricks of being your own boss is figuring out like you get to prioritize what ways feel best for your body as long as you're getting the work done, and also you have to figure out how the fuck to get that work done.
Yeah.
Um, so what can, as you're working on these writing projects, people can, be subscribed to your newsletter in order to like stay up to date on that and follow you on Instagram for that at Locust Light Farm. Although you're like in and off of Instagram. So I would recommend that people join that newsletter so that they can actually see things on a more reliable basis. Um, and not lose things to the fucking algorithm. But also, what else do you have available for people whilst they're waiting on those stories?
Well, if you're interested in plant magic, I have an intro class called Plant Magic for Beginners.
Hmm.
It's like a nice bite-sized class. It's available on my website.
Hmm.
And if you're interested in herbalism, I teach a monthly class called Practical Herbalism.
Cool.
And those are live classes that I record.
Hmm.
And so you could either sign up, for the next upcoming Practical Herbalism class. Um, it's like the last Thursday of the month, midday.
Hmm.
Or if go search through my online classes, you'll find like pre-recorded topics. And those are topics like herbs for heart health, herbs for immune health, all that.
Cool.
So I have, yeah, some plant magic online classes and herbalism online classes, but definitely my newsletter is the best way to stay in touch. Yeah, I haven't been on Instagram in a long time.
I am just always so impressed at everyone who's able to like run businesses and remove themselves from social media in like a reliable way that doesn't so drastically affect the bottom line. I've done it with certain platforms. I have yet to figure it out with other platforms.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think maybe my business would be bigger if I was on social media, but then when I think about like trying to wrap my head around like the Instagram strategy, the thing is like the Instagram is so many modalities in one.
Yes. Yeah, they're like, oh,
It's like
really popular, so let's like add it like fucking TikTok. The role that TikTok has played has now completely changed the way that Instagram is functioning, to the extent that like when I downloaded Instagram back onto my phone in order to be doing these lives, that all of a sudden I was getting recommendations of reels, and it was like suggested post from this person, and it was like literally every other post. I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm not following these people. I don't want this in my feed. And so at this point, I was still able to hide it for 30 days, and then I'm going to have to hide it again for another 30 days. But like, what about the day that they decide, oh, okay, this is now just the way that Instagram is functioning? Like, I think it will get to a point where I'm like, fuck this. I'm like, there's a reason that I'm not on TikTok. My nervous system can't handle it. I'm not interested in like having a bunch of stuff that an algorithm thinks I want to see that I haven't actually even consented to begin with appearing in my feed. it's hard enough sometimes, like navigating the content that I have chosen to opt into, and then like still having it coming in like a really kind of mishmash way. And so yeah, it's, I don't know, but it definitely takes a huge additional amount of brain power that
Yeah,
I could very much be using for other things.
yeah, yeah. And I like writing, like I love writing emails. So
Mm.
to me, I'm like, writing is one modality.
Yes,
I can handle that. So that's what I do. And
I
I
like
don't
it.
know.
Love it. Um, so people can sign up for your newsletter and find your classes on your website at locustlightfarm.com. And then, of course, follow you here on Instagram at Locust Light Farm for the times that you are popping onto the Instagram. And then, but I would say people should probably just like grab that newsletter, because then also as things are shifting, and as you are, as these stories become available, and then also as gardens become new, you find that land and all of that in the future, that's going to be probably the best way to stay in touch with that and find out about that, so that locals or anybody who's traveling through your area is able to come and see those beautiful gardens in real life, and experience that in real life. Um, Thank you so much for being here, Amanda. This has been delightful. I've really enjoyed just like thinking about plants in this way with you and talking about plants. Um, and for folks that are also interested in herbalism, and kind of going down your own rabbit holes, specifically within the Sanctuary Hub, there's resources about aphrodisiacs, as well as reproductive health care. And I've kind of organized things and resources. The resources themselves might be quite gendered, but I have organized them in non-gendered ways, because as queer-bodied people, it's really fucking annoying trying to find plants, and they're like, this is a woman's herb, this is a men's herb, and you're like, what the fuck, it means nothing. So I've organized things in non-gendered ways, and so you can find those resources amongst oodles of other goodies in the Sanctuary Hub at ashalberg.com/sanctuary. It is linked in my bio. And we are back tomorrow with, I think, Sheila. Sheila, do I have that right? Is that the schedule? My brain, I realized, I was like, I haven't actually checked to see who I'm talking to tomorrow. I'm pretty sure it's Sheila, who's another one of our dear friends, and part of our Bizwitch coven. If it's not Sheila, it's somebody else, but I'm pretty sure it's Sheila. And we'll be back tomorrow for our next live. And in the meantime, go find Amanda at locustlightfarm.com. Thank you so much for being here, my darling.
Thank you, Ash.
See y'all later.